Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Rachel Kush, and today I'm going to share with you the beginning of my birth story. So I'm so excited because I'm officially a little bit about a month out from giving birth to my twin boys. We had them early September. And my birth vlog, I'm going to record like a full one, but I thought it would be kind of great to break it up a little bit so it's not super long, especially because we had a preterm labor scare at 32 weeks. I think it's important to add that to the birth story because it actually, while it was kind of scary and like a little unnerving, it actually helped when we actually went into labor at 35 weeks. I also think that it's important for you to know the signs of preterm labor, and so I hope that if you guys are pregnant right now and any of these symptoms or signs are happening to you, you know to go to your doctor and check it out. So let's get started. If you don't know already, I got pregnant in January with twin boys. They are DI boys. If you have twins, you'll know what that means. It means they have separate placentas and separate amniotic sacs. And so because multiples are high-risk pregnancy, we were going very frequently to the doctors to be monitored. We were having ultrasounds about, I want to say, once a month in the beginning, and at the end about every 2 weeks. At the very end of my pregnancy, one time a week. That's just to make sure they're growing right. I also, starting at 32 weeks, started going to the hospital for NST testing, and that is basically like fetal stress test monitoring, and what it tells us is if the babies are healthy in the womb and if they are thriving in there basically. But right before we started that, in week 32, at that point we were about to start the NST testing, but that week I started to have like a fatigue hit a little bit harder, a lot of nausea, a lot of dizziness, really bad vertigo when I was walking around. I was just like not feeling well. So in week 32, one of the nights that I went to bed, I was continually having Braxton-Hicks contractions. And if you don't know what those are basically, I don't want to call them practice contractions, but your uterus is stretched so far and then it's just contracting back almost, I don't want to say because it's overstretched, but it can, you know, it's the size of it is causing it to basically contract. So anyways, Braxton-Hicks contractions are, they are not real contractions. They don't open the cervix, if I'm thinking correctly. And then also they're very sporadic. So I would have them like walking around just like the house, and then I wouldn't have one for 2 hours, or I'd have like 2 or 3 in a row and then I wouldn't have them for, you know, the rest of the day. And so but the night that we went into preterm labor, I went to bed. I was not feeling well, and so we were in bed pretty early. On top of that, I was obviously like super pregnant, and so going to bed early is always amazing. So at about 2 in the morning, 1:30 or 2 in the morning, I woke up to a Braxton-Hicks contraction, or what I thought was Braxton-Hicks contractions, where it was so tight that I actually physically couldn't get out of the bed. I woke up to the seizing feeling, and then when I went to get up, I couldn't. Once the Braxton-Hicks contraction passed, I was able to get up, use the bathroom. When I went back to bed, I was pretty good at just immediately falling back asleep. About 20 minutes later, the same thing happened, and by 2:30 or 3, I had 3 or 4 of these contractions that were so bad that I couldn't physically get myself out of bed. They were waking me up, but I was like kind of stuck in bed until it passed. And so it was like every time I looked at the clock, it was like 20 minutes on the dot. And so I got up to use the bathroom again around 3. At this point, I'm feeling like in my back, I'm feeling what feels like period cramping, like when your back kind of hurts, and it's just dull and low pain, but it wasn't like unbearable. The funny thing was, someone I had been following their pregnancy, they actually had gone to the hospital for that type of pain, thinking it was labor pain, and in reality they were just constipated. So in my head I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to go to the hospital for this and have them be like, you just need to poop. So, you know, maybe I'll walk around, and if I am like backed up a little, that will help. So I'm pacing the bathroom, I'm pacing the house, drinking cold water. Right before 4 o'clock, I'm timing them again just to see. And at this point, they're kind of getting closer together. They're getting to about 10 minutes apart. And I'm thinking in my head, like, you know, I'm sure they'll just stop. I've had Braxton-Hicks contractions before that were, you know, back to back to back. But then, like, after like 40 minutes, they just stopped. So I didn't want to like drive myself over to the hospital, be admitted, and then find out that they just stopped. You know, like, that is like the worst feeling. You kind of feel crazy. I knew my husband was getting up. I didn't want him to be worried, so I got back in bed and pretended to sleep. And then he woke up and got ready for work. And I told him, you know, I'm like still feeling kind of sick. I might go into the OB triage to check it out. I didn't really tell him about the contractions because I didn't want him to like freak out. I also really didn't think that I was in any like labor situation. I really thought that the Braxton-Hicks contractions and a combination of maybe constipation being backed up was causing like this feeling. So once my husband went to work, I got up, I walked our dog, and then I got in the car and started driving to the hospital. Our hospital is really close, thank goodness, and I buzzed in and they put me right into the triage area, and of course hooked me up to the monitors. And I had not been, I don't think, to an NST appointment yet, so I didn't really know what to expect. But they strap like bands around your belly with like these like monitors, one for each baby, and then they also have like a third strap with a third monitor, and it is for your contractions. By the time I was admitted around 5, I want to say, around 5 a.m. when we were monitoring the contractions, they were actually 5 minutes apart. And so at that point, they realized, you know, we really need to do something to stop this. So I was put on an IV, given a lot of fluid. I wasn't dehydrated because even though, well, I didn't feel like I was dehydrated because I know dehydration can cause like more contractions, but I was chugging like almost like over a gallon of water a day. So I really didn't feel dehydrated, but they put fluid in, and then of course, you know, that didn't ease up anything. And so they added a medicine into the IV, and about this time I had texted a friend of mine. She came over to the hospital at about 6, I think, to 6 or 7 to check on me. And at that point, the contractions were just staying steady. My cervix was not opening though. And so we were really grateful for that because well, I think at that point though, I was about 90% effaced, which means the cervix had thinned considerably, but the cervix wasn't opening. And so there's two different things, like your cervix gets thinner and thinner and then it opens. While being effaced is fine, you can actually be a little bit dilated and not even go into labor, but we were really happy to see that I wasn't dilated. I also met my delivering doctor that day. He came in and, you know, talked to me about being effaced, and then also talked to me about getting a shot that would stop the contractions. So at the hospital, I ended up getting meds in the IV. I'm not sure what it was. And then I got a shot, and I think it was in the back of my right arm. I'm not sure what the medicine is. I just know that it stops contractions. I will say that it feels kind of like a bee sting, and it makes you feel like you drank like a gallon of coffee. Like, I was so like wired afterwards. They also gave me pain meds because at that point I had been contracting for so long. I was like, I literally, my ribs and my abdomen were in a lot of, they were sore. I don't want to say I was in a lot of pain. They were pretty sore. But after the medicine was administered, it was only about, I would say, like an hour before they began to taper off. And so between 8 and like 10:30, the contractions started to slowly taper off. By 10:30, they were, I want to say, at least 20 minutes apart, and not as regular. Like, they weren't exactly 20 minutes apart. They were like hit or miss. And so at that point, I was cleared to leave and go home. I had a work meeting to get to anyways, so I was really determined to be able to get home and get on my work call. at this point, I just knew going in, I didn't want to have the babies at this point in the pregnancy. 32 weeks would have been very early, and so while I know that there's a lot of amazing medical interventions, and I'm really grateful that they were able to stop my preterm labor, or my preterm labor scare. You know, I'm glad I went in when I did. The nurse also said, like, if you're having contractions that strong and they're 10 minutes apart, like, in my head I'm thinking, like, if they're not 5 minutes apart and really long and really strong, this is probably not real contractions. But she said that she's seen people go deliver when their contractions are only 10 minutes apart. So not to wait that long again. And so they also gave me a list of things to look for and other preterm labor signs to look for, like bleeding, your water breaking, obviously the contractions that are that close together and steady. And so that really kind of like opened my eyes and made me realize that, like, you know, you may not think that anything is wrong, or you don't want to you don't want to feel foolish and go in and just be constipated or just be having Braxton-Hicks contractions. But I'm really glad that I went in, because, you know, if we had let it go further, potentially my cervix would have started opening and we could have had our twins at 32 weeks. And so I think it's just important to trust your body, and, like, you know, I really believe it's better safe than sorry. I think that, you know, I don't know why there's this like feeling of like guilt or shame when you know, maybe don't know what's going on with your body, or you think it's one thing and it doesn't happen to be. No nurse, no doctor is making fun of you and being like, oh, that girl's stupid, like she didn't even know it was a Braxton-Hicks contraction. That's their job, to know what you don't know. That's why they're the nurses and doctors. And I think that if anything you get from our preterm labor scare is, if you think for any reason that you might be in preterm labor or that you are having contractions, that you should go to your doctor, or you should check in at the OB triage. I really, you know, I'm so grateful that we caught it, because 32 weeks would have meant some significant NICU time for the boys, and them being born later on, they didn't experience that. So that was really good for us. I also think that, you know, it's okay to be wrong and then go home and still be safe, versus be scared to ask the questions or get checked out and then you start going into labor and it's too far gone. So I really hope that you guys just trust yourselves and make an effort to not, I hear from so many people that they're like, oh, I don't want to go because I don't want to feel dumb, or my contractions aren't this. Or the other thing I heard all the time is, you'll know when you're in like they're real contractions. But that's not always the case. Like, I think that everybody's so different. You know, that pain in my back, or the dull like ache in my back, like, was a sign as well that I was having more real contractions. You know, I imagined that if I was having contractions, that they would feel like so bad that I'd be like writhing in pain and crying and not able to drive myself, the way, you know, that you see in movies, or people say you'll know because it's that painful. But sometimes you don't know, so it's just always better safe than sorry. The last part of this preterm labor was that after we left, we had an appointment with our doctor, our OB, in I think 2 or 3 days later. And one of the most amazing things was that when we went, they actually had me get a steroid shot because of the preterm labor scare that we had. The steroid shot is for the baby's lung development. So because lung development is super late in your pregnancy term, preterm babies often have breathing issues, and so there is a steroid that they inject in you that speeds up the baby's lung development. At our next appointment, they recommended we do that, and obviously we were more than happy to, because of what we had just been through. And obviously if we didn't need it, we didn't need it if they didn't come super early, but it was a good backup. I will tell you, that shot goes in your butt. It is it is something. The shot itself doesn't really hurt, but the medicine going in burns. Like, it stings so bad, and like the nerve, and it's also kind of unnerving because they're like, okay, turn around, pull your pants down, lean over, you know, relax this butt cheek, and then, you know, they're squeezing your butt cheek, and And then they're like rubbing in the medicine to make it like less stingy, if that's a thing. But yeah, and then I actually, after that, I was like, man, that wasn't too bad. And then the doctor was like, actually, you're gonna need a second follow-up one tomorrow. So I went back the next day and got the second of those 2 shots. And I'm really glad I did, because we actually went into labor at 35 weeks and 3 days. But that is my preterm labor scare part of our birth story. And then I'm going to be uploading the actual birth story, what follows this, the 2 weeks basically leading up to our delivery of the twins. And so I'm excited to share that with you. Thank you for tuning in. If you like this, subscribe and follow along and hit the notification so you can see when I put my birth vlog. Thanks, guys.